there's death. But we're looking at after death comes the afterlife. A 3-year-old boy by the name of Colton Burpo, maybe you all realize who I'm talking about, and maybe some of you have read his book or read the book about his life. 3-year-old Colton had a near-death experience, an NDE, on the operating table. 3 years old now, remind you. And he began to tell, after the surgery, about his experience with heaven. How he was able to see Samson, John the Baptist, and even Jesus, the blue eyes of the Lord, who was riding upon a multicolored pony or horse, however you want to say it. I didn't read the book yet, and I did not watch the movie. Maybe some of you have seen the movie that was made about it. I have read some stories about an after-death experience of others that I've had. This story here about 3-year-old Colton kind of intrigued me just a little bit. And I thought, well, how many of you believe in NDEs? Okay. How many of you believe that Colton's story is down to earth experience of what he's talking about, or what the movie showing? I haven't watched the movie, so I'm not sure. I haven't read the book, so I'm not sure. But his dad was a Wesleyan minister, and his dad was almost positive that the experiences as Colton relayed them was true. In other words, he could say it was a fact, and he believed those facts. Just on the way here this morning, I was listening to the radio in the car, and the name just slipped my mind of what his name is. But it's Rise Up Country. Maybe some of you have heard that program. And anyway, he was telling about his sister that had Parkinson's disease, but she had died and passed away. And he said, she doesn't have the shakes anymore. She's in a far better place. She's in the arms of her husband and his 2 brothers. He said, I know that to be a fact. What about life after death? What about the place called hell? The grave, the pit. Names that are in the Bible that not only is it talked about from Revelation, or from Genesis all the way through to the book of Revelations. Names like Sheol. Did you know that in the King James Version, Sheol is recorded 65 times? And out of those 65 times in the King James, 31 times it listed it as hell, and 31 times it's listed as the grave, and 3 times as the pit. I kind of want to look those up, wouldn't you? And see what Scripture really says. This writer is saying that it's in King James, but if you look in other translations, it may use a little bit different terminology. And so it's important, I think, to search those Scriptures out and find out just what the Bible is saying about Hades. I know you've heard that word. I don't know about Gehenna, if you've heard that one. Or how about Tartarus, if you've heard that one either. But anyway, from the Old Testament all the way through the New Testament, we have these phrases being used from time to time. And even Jesus speaks of hell quite often, and the grave. Life after death. You know, I don't know how many people probably think that as soon as one dies and they're put in the grave, that's it. That's the end of it. For we know if we were to dig up a grave, what we would find: ashes. Well, what about life after death? What do we really need to search this for? It must have been important for it to be included, and even Jesus to speak the words in many cases in Scripture. And so therefore it must be an important subject for us to come to understand. He said, look, Malachi said, I am sending a messenger. But people are not interested, are they? If people were interested, our churches would be full instead of collapsing, and many of them being sold or turned back into the counties or the property owners that might hold the deeds to the church. When I was pastor at Mount Pleasant, we had a person that bought a farm right next to the church, and he would come up on the weekends, and we would come to church on Sunday morning, and he'd have a hay wagon sitting out in front of the church on the parking lot where he had been unloading bales of hay, for he had the land right next to the church. And word got back that he said he owned the church. So the church began to say, oh, no, he doesn't. We have a deed to the church. And so they began to find the deed to see just who did own the property. And then we had to talk to that person and say, you know, just what's going on here? Because we come to church on Sunday to worship, and we have to walk through hay or baled strings and stuff just to get to the front steps.